Okay.
That week, I knew that God was real and that He loved me, and I'd never be alone.
Coming out of the water was different.
This is my story.
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 This is my story. My name is Alan Fedregon. I'm from just north of Shelbyville, and most people know me because I'm Lori Good's husband. I attend the first service and am involved in the worship ministry. I met Lori in November of 2018, and she obviously has attended ACC for many years, and I started to come occasionally to church with her, but because of my responsibilities in Shelbyville, we couldn't go to church very often together. We made the decision to come here and commute to come to church, which was a difficult decision, and it was hard for Lori because I think she felt like I was giving up everything. And I said, well, we either both give up our churches and look for a new church, or we choose one. And we chose ACC. Being a relatively newcomer to ACC, and I think, we had two services in Shelbyville too, but I think when you have multiple services, you don't get to know a lot of people unless you're involved in a lot of things that involve small groups and such, which we are now, but you still don't get to know a lot of people. And especially when you don't have kids, like we don't have kids and come to a lot of the things, the kid things. And I know we could, but we don't. And so I think I was happy when I was asked to do this because I think it's an opportunity for people who don't know who Alan Fedregon is to get to know a little bit about me and maybe get a chance to meet me one day between services or something.
Alan Fedregon and not Lori Good's husband.
Lori Good's husband, that's correct. If
All
I'm
right.
referred to as Lori Good's husband, I'm good with that too.
All right.
I have a sister 4 years older than me and twin brothers 2 years younger than me. And my parents are both gone. I was married for 31 years to a Shelbyville girl, second grade teacher down there, and we didn't have children. And so I didn't think that I would ever be a grandpa. And here we are. When I met Lori, she had 3 children and 8 grandchildren. And now I get to be like a grandpa at this stage in my life, something that I never thought I'd be able to do. It's awesome. Letting them ride around my yard on four-wheelers and go-kart that I bought them last year, and taking them for rides in a tractor. It's just, taking them fishing. We've got a couple ponds in our neighborhood, and they love to fish. So I really enjoy doing that with them. I have an agriculture degree in soil science and plant pathology. And I worked in agriculture for 4 years. I had an opportunity to go into manufacturing, and I jumped on that opportunity. I was there for 17 years. I got back into agriculture for a year. I ended up at Caterpillar until 2017, and basically retired after one more year in agriculture in 2018. Now I just farm full-time in the spring and the fall for a buddy of mine in Findlay. The technology and the equipment, that's probably why I still do this at my age. I just still enjoy, planting a seed and seeing it grow to harvest and then harvesting it. It's a lot of work, but it is so rewarding, and I just enjoy where technology has taken agriculture, and I enjoy being a part of that. We typically have newer equipment and just enjoy operating that equipment. I think most of us take for granted that tomorrow's going to happen, and I think it's just, you see it happen. When you see the sun comes up, you think God's starting the day, and when you see the sun go down, it's like God saying good night. I've got this, and we'll see you again in the morning. And I post pictures on Facebook sometimes of sunrises and sunsets, and I think, oh, that just gets kind of boring. You know, I need to quit doing that. And I've had people at the church say, oh, keep putting them on there because I just love seeing them. And sometimes you'll be in the tractor or the combine and you'll just look over and you'll see, wow, that looks like a pretty good shot. And we have some pretty big fields. And by the time you get back to that same place, you know, it's like, well, it's gone. It's already down, or it's up too far now. But every once in a while, you'll just get that perfect shot. And I think, you know, I think when people look at them, maybe they get to see what I see every day. That's an easy one, golf. I took a golf course at U of I because I needed a PE course, and I thought I'll just take a golf class, you know, and I learned how to play. I was awful. And I really hated the game and played and wasn't good and quit. And I got into a job at Blawnox in inside sales. And my wife said, you probably need to pick the game back up because you're probably going to have opportunities to golf for work. And she was right. What I found out the second time around, why I disliked it so much the first time was I didn't have any friends that golfed. I just golfed and I was bad. So now or then I golfed and was bad, but I had friends that golfed. And so I enjoyed the social aspect of the game. And one of my friends is a good golfer, and he's gotten me to be a better golfer now. So, but I enjoy golf, and being retired now and not farming much in the summer, I get to golf pretty much every day if I want to. Breaded pork tenderloin, lettuce, mayonnaise, tomato, pickle, maybe some mustard. So I asked Lori this the other night, and she's thinking, and I said, okay, I'm not asking for a list. I just need the top answer. And she said, well, that's easy. You're not a patient person, especially with her,
Ooh.
according to her.
Oh.
And she's probably right. Alligator, they're just so powerful. And I used to golf in Orlando and at Myrtle Beach, and you see them there, you see them on the course. And you realize if you don't know and you research it a little bit, that they're really fast and you really can't outrun them on foot. And so I watch swamp people some. I know it's disturbing because, you know, it's the animal that you kind of are most scared of, and you watch them shooting these things and dragging them into the boat. And you just realize how big and how powerful they are and what they could do to you if they wanted to. Food cooking on the grill.
Any particular food?
Meat.
Any particular meat?
No, it could be chicken, pork, or beef. Sauerkraut. Yahoo Sports. You can go there and see at any point in time what's going on in the golf tournament, what the Cardinals are doing, Illini basketball, football, if I'm not watching it. So I use that app a lot. Dogs. I have one of each, and the dog looks forward to seeing you when you get home, doesn't want you to leave. The cat could care less because my first wife wanted a cat, and she rescued cats from strays in the woods where we live, and I had to take them to the vet and get them fixed and keep them, and I still have one that's still with us. It's interesting because we are not binge watchers. We, unlike most people, we don't like have Netflix. We just started streaming TV. That's how, you know, in the old days we are. But we still were able to get cable TV where we lived, and that went away. So I would say that if we are going to binge watch, we have a season or two of The Chosen, and we're gonna start watching that. I'm not a huge book reader, but I need these kinds of books to read, and it's Happy, Happy, Happy by Phil Robertson. Phil Robertson is the patriarch of the Robertson family, which is Duck Dynasty and Duck Commander Duck Calls. He writes books that are just straight from the heart, and he had a pretty rough life growing up. If you saw the recent movie about him and his family, it's worth going to. And it just speaks to your heart, because he was just an everyday guy that had a love for Christ, did a lot of things wrong, and just got a good woman that got him back on the right path. And I just ordered a new book by him that I just got, and it said, Maybe I'm Wrong, but I Doubt It. And it basically talks about why Christ is the answer for today and eternity. Maybe I'm wrong, but I doubt it. That it would be a cartoon, and that Elmer Fudd would play me. That Wascally Rabbit. I would go to Italy, where my grandpa was born. Now, it wasn't Italy when he was born, it was Austria, but it was taken over in World War I, and my grandpa had to put an I on the end of his name and become a Fedrigoni, because he was now an Italian, and he moved to the United States when he was a young man. I had 11 brothers and sisters, and he was the only one that moved to the United States. And so my mom and dad have been there and got to see where he grew up in the mountains, and actually got to see family that was still alive back when I was 15. So I think I'd like to go see where he was raised. My dad could speak Italian and read and write Italian, so he would write letters, and once a year, it was actually on Christmas Day, he would call. A neighbor had a phone, and they would go get him, and he would call, and Mom would be in the background with the book translating some words for him, and it was an interesting call every year. But he would write to him, and my grandpa, when they went in 1975, my grandpa was still alive, and he had several brothers and sisters still alive, and he had a sister that he had never met, because she was born after he moved to the United States. And he wouldn't go because he'd never been on an airplane. He came over on a boat, and he wasn't getting on an airplane. And a few years later, my dad's cousin from France and her daughter that was in high school that could speak like 5 languages came to the United States and brought my grandpa's youngest sister. They all put money together and brought her, and they stayed for a couple weeks with us. And it was really neat to see my grandpa get to meet a sibling that he had never met before.
So when did they drop the I?
He did when he moved to the United States. The rest of them still have it on there, because when they would send letters, it would have, Gerald Fedrigoni. They would put the I on our name. But, Grandpa, when he moved to the United States, he took it off because he said he wasn't Italian. He was Austrian. My dad's mother, my grandmother, be the wife of my grandpa that I would just want to go visit where he grew up. She died when my dad was 12, so I never got to meet her. I've only had one grandma, and she died when I was in junior high, so I didn't have a grandma past junior high, and I really would have loved to met my dad's mom, but she died of spinal meningitis. I can only imagine by Mercy Me. Live every day for Christ. In 2015, I was named Big Brothers Big Sisters Big Brother of the Year for the state of Illinois. It was quite an honor. I started with Deontay when he was in the 3rd grade. He would have been in the 8th grade when I received this honor. So they made a video, and it has me and Deontay and his grandmother in it. And that is actually can be found on YouTube. If you type in my name, of course you have to spell it right, ALANFEDRIGON, and it'll show up. And it's a 5-minute video. It's not to promote myself at all, but it's just an interesting thing to watch about Big Brothers Big Sisters. And I said it back then, I don't know that I did anything more special than anybody else in the state of Illinois, but apparently they thought that I did. And I think part of it is just the long-term relationship that we had, because I think a lot of the relationships in that environment don't last the number of years that ours did. And we still communicate today. He's 21, 22 now, but we still communicate today. So we had one of those June 6th on my birthday. Got up, went out to a restaurant, had breakfast with Lori, went golfing with my best friend, came home, waxed my car, put the second coat on. It was in the shed, ready for the second coat. So put the second coat on, waiting for Lori to get home from Decatur. When she got home, we took off her champagne, got her ring inspected and cleaned. We have to do that every 6 months. And went to Red Lobster for dinner and drove home with her. And I just said, when I saw this as a question, I said, well, I just had it. I just had it. Maybe not the waxing of the car, but it was okay. It was just needed done. And, I had a little bit of time and could finish that job, and in between doing all the things that I love to do. March 22nd, 1988, I was baptized. I was 28 years old. I think that's the most important decision you'll make in your life.
Why?
For eternal life. I was raised Catholic. Becky was raised Methodist. I knew I wasn't going to go to the Catholic Church. We tried the Methodist Church. That didn't work out so well for us. And so somebody invited us to Shelby Christian Church. It was a friend's day. Invite somebody to come. And they invited us, and we went. It wasn't long after that we got put under an elder, under a shepherding group, and they had their first pass at having a Bible study in the home, not at the church. And we got under Benny's group, and it was just kind of one of those things. I remember going that first night, and I prayed about it because I knew I was going to be more receptive to this than Becky was. And even though she was a school teacher, she wasn't a big reader and did not like to read out loud. And she said, driving that night, if he wants me to read out loud out of the Bible, I will not go back. And I'm like, oh, Lord. And the first thing Benny said was, I was raised in Tennessee, and I didn't graduate from high school. And I got embarrassed one day in church when they called on me and asked me to do something that I wasn't able to do. And I decided then and there, if I ever get into a position of leadership, I will not do that. I will not ask somebody to do something that I don't know ahead of time that they would be okay doing it. And about the third week, she asked me to buy her a Bible. Another woman said, this is the one that you ought to get. And we got it. At the end of that 13 weeks, Benny came and he knocked on our door, and he said, on a Monday night, and he said, I've been watching you two. It was a fundamentals kind of class, learning to read, learning to pray, learning to, and he said, I think you guys are ready to be baptized. You need to make that decision. And we said, well, we've been talking about that, and we believe you're right. We do want to make that decision. So the next day we get a call from the pastor, and he said, can I come see you? I said, yeah. And he came that night, Tuesday night, to see us. And he said, now, Benny tells us you guys want to be baptized. I said, yep. Do you want to be baptized because Benny wants you to be baptized, or do you want to be baptized because you believe that you should be baptized? And we went through all that. And Becky said, but I don't want to be baptized in front of a whole bunch of people on a Sunday morning at church or Wednesday night after Bible study. And he said, looked at his watch, and he said, can you be at the church in 30 minutes? And I looked at her like, now what are you going to say? She said, yes. He said, let me make a few calls. And we got to the church, and our people from our shepherding group was there, and our elder, Benny. And she's like, there's people here. And I said, these are people that want to be here, that want to share in this moment with us. The baptistry was cold because it wasn't ready for a baptism, and we were baptized. And so I think it's one of the greatest days of my life, one of the greatest decisions that I'll ever make, and still believe that today. Becky taking her last breath in my arms at 3:00 in the morning on July 10th, 2017. She was diagnosed with stage 4 liver cancer 11 months prior to that day. And she got through, that was her last year of teaching school before she'd already planned retirement. And she passed July 10th of 2017. You know, we were asked early on to speak at the Hugs ministry event that's on Tuesday night, I think, with Cheryl. And I guess I didn't ask Lori. I thought I asked Lori, but apparently I didn't. And Cheryl said, you know, it's coming up in a couple of weeks. And have you talked to Lori? I said, no. And I talked to Lori and she freaked out. And I said, look, I'll do most of the talking. You know, we got some things we wanted to read. I said, you can read. I want you there to interject from your perspective, some of these things too, but I'll do the lead. I'll take it. I don't have a problem with it. One of the things that concerned us about talking to this group was that because we were them, we are them, but we got married, 3 years ago. Like I said, neither one of us thought we would do that. And God, we believe God brought us together, and God had a different plan for our lives than we thought that we were going to have. And one of the reasons I didn't want to speak at the Hugs group was that I didn't want it to seem like, well, look at us. Look at how happy we are now. But I had somebody tell me one time, it was another teacher in Shelbyville that lost her husband, and they were younger too, like us, and I don't think they were even quite to 50. She said, it gives me hope when I see you and I see your story and I see what's happened. It gives me hope. And I would tell people that it gets easier. There's some things that don't. There's dates that are always reminders that will never change. Birthdays, anniversaries, whatever, the special days. But it gets better. And I don't honestly know how people go through this kind of event without having a relationship with Jesus. I don't know how they do it. It would have to seem so hopeless, because that's what gives you hope. That's interesting because I remember, and we told the group this, I was mad at God. I remember going to my pastor and saying, I'm mad. He said, do you think he'd be shocked that you're mad? He created us as humans. We have our own feelings. We make our own decisions. We're not robots. We're not puppets. So I'm mad at God, right? But I tell people that every day I got up and I asked God to get me through that next day. So I said that the same person that I'm mad at is also the person that I'm saying, I can't get through this day without you. And that's the only way. And I think it's there's a process, and you grieve, and you're mad, you go through all that. And for some, there's no recipe to that. It can be lengthy. Typically, the experts will tell you that it's a shorter period for men than women. The problem going through this, though, in this world is the world expects you to get over it sooner than you can get over it, because they do. They move on. They go back to their lives. They go back to their families. They go back, and they don't realize what you're sitting there going through. They try. People care. People love you, but they don't know unless they've been through it. And when I told Lori that we needed to speak to this Hugs group because they need to hear from somebody that's gone through it just like they have and are where we're at, which is something if they hope to be one day, that they'll see our story and how we got here. And it's just a long process that's can be agonizing at times. My childhood buddy that I met in junior high, went all the way through school with, that's where I got an interest in agriculture. He farmed. His mom became my second mom. Brett Bond is his name, and he was the best man at my wedding. Still friends today. They were Christian, a Christian family. And I started to go to some things, youth group things with him, because when you're Catholic, you don't really have youth group stuff. At least in the day that I was raised Catholic. So I'd start going to some things with him and started to see that there was more than what I knew and had been taught. And I became real interested. And so for me, you know, I credit this family as getting the foundation for me into something other than being a Catholic. His mom would like to take the most credit because she beat me over the head with her Bible every time I came into the door and wanted to preach to me. But it was Bob, his dad, that probably had the most influence on me because he didn't preach to me. He lived it. And I got to see as a junior high boy through high school, through college, I had a three-way partnership raising hogs with Brett and his dad when I was in high school and college. I got to see what being a godly man, being a godly father, and being a godly husband looked like. My dad was a good guy, don't get me wrong, and I learned a lot of good stuff from my dad. I also learned a lot of bad things from my dad, but I can't credit him for this stuff, okay? But I do credit that family. And I look back on my life and how I got to where I got. You know, God He puts people in your lives. And you don't always think that when you're in the moment, but when you get a chance to look back on it. And I remember one day something happening with Brett, with relationship with his wife. And I won't go into that, but it was not good. They got through it. And they're strong today, but it devastated me. And I kind of took an attitude like, oh, well, I don't know if I want to do this. I don't know if I want to be a Christian if this is what a Christian looks like, you know. And Bob, the dad, got a hold of me. The only time he ever preached to me. And he said, Alan, because I talked to Bob about it. And he said, Alan, I'm disappointed too. Trust me, he's my son. However, are you following Brett? Or are you following God and Jesus? And he said, don't follow man, because man will fail and man will let you down. That was the only time Bob preached to me, but it was effective because it turned me around, and here I am today. I have to go back to July 10th of 2017. You know, from that moment on, you know, yeah, God just worked in my life because I needed him more than I really thought I ever needed him before.
Did you ever think that you would get remarried?
No, I didn't. After Becky passed, it was really the furthest thing from my mind. I was 57 at the time and thinking dating today just makes me ill just to think about it, honestly. And after about a year or so, it just, I realized that I just hated being alone. I just hated it. and I didn't have children, and I didn't have grandchildren, that's where Lori and I differed in our lives. She lost Kenny in the fall before I lost Becky in July of the next year. Now, we didn't know each other. A mutual friend wanted us to meet just because we were both widowed and just thought that would be good. She would hear our stories and listen to us and say, geez, I need to get these two to have coffee or something. But neither one of us like coffee. But so, I think one of the biggest differences that we discussed for us was that she had family that was there, for her and children and grandchildren as a distraction. And I didn't. I just had an empty house with a dog and a cat. You would think that'd be a hard question.
Nope.
I better take a drink on that one. I would say that we don't have a huge number of things in common. I think one obvious one would be our love for Christ and being involved in the church, which is huge. I mean, if you don't have that one, then that makes for a really rough go. We both like being outdoors. We both like walking, her a little more than me, hiking, her a little more than me. So, going to the Smoky Mountains and walking on a trail and seeing a waterfall is something that we enjoy doing. Neither one of us are big go lay on the beach kind of people. So I think, maybe it would be easy sometimes to say things that we don't like. We both don't like those together. So we like being outdoors. She doesn't like air conditioning and I do. So that seems to be a conflict sometimes in our household. She tends to think that 82 degrees in the house is comfortable, and I think it's like I'm dying here. So, patience, not fast enough. So we have to be patient about learning about patience. And I think it's just the things that I described Bob with, although not necessarily father, but father-like, being a godly man, being the spiritual leader in my family, being a godly husband, and being a God-like father and grandfather. Well, that's a good question. I think, one of the things, and we have talked about this in our small group a little bit, we kind of, we pray together in the evening, and read together and pray together in the evenings generally. And there are some evenings that I'm just, I've worked longer day or whatever, and I just get tired and I want to go to bed. And, being the spiritual leader is you say, no, I know I'm tired, but we need to do this. I need to set the example and not just cop out and go to bed. And Lori and I have talked about that. And she said, well, I'm responsible for that too. And I agree that there's a shared responsibility with some of this stuff, but I think ultimately the responsibility falls on me. The Bible's very specific about that. And I think it's not just, it just could be everyday things. Just how I react to something, it's not, a typical guy reaction, or am I more considerate about, how I am with her, how I am with the grandkids or whomever it may be. I just think it's the example that you have to be and should be, as a spiritual leader. Spiritual leader isn't just let's get out the book and study. It's like Bob, it's living the example, because a lot of people I've found over the years don't want to be taught. They don't want to be beat over the head, but they watch and they learn from watching. And you can do a lot of things right, but you do the one thing bad, and that just trumps everything else. Well, I attend on Thursday morning at 6 in the morning a men's prayer group called The Forge in Shelbyville at New Hope Church. And we start with 2 worship songs, God moments, people get up and talk, then there's a devotion, and then we split up in groups of 2 or 3 or 4 guys and pray. And I really enjoy that morning because A, it starts the morning off right, B, it's men, and it's men getting together, being vulnerable with other men, talking about things that they're failing with their marriages, with their families, with their jobs, and it's okay in that environment. And that's hard for a man because we don't do that. We don't like to admit failure, but we all have it. And that environment just fosters the conversations, and I think one of the things I really enjoy about this group is there are several young men in their 20s, and even some that would come before school in high school, and it just warms my heart to see these guys getting involved in this, because when I was their age, that was the last thing that I would have gone to, honestly. And to see where they're at that stage in their life, and then listening to guys that are in their 40s, 50s, 60s stand up and talk about things that they've experienced in their marriage and in their walk with the Lord, I think is just great. You know, there's probably some guys that would never get up front and say anything, and that's okay, because somebody else is saying something that they would have or might have. And I think that's what's good about support groups in general is, and why I went to one after my wife passed, and I wasn't going to, because I'm not an introvert, and I figured that I may say something that somebody else is going through but doesn't want to say it and doesn't want to talk or get up in front of anybody. And so I may have helped somebody just with my own experience and willingness to share it. I got up one week because they were talking about men and how spending time with their wives and, you know, doing things that's important to them, not just us. And I got up and I shared that I watched a Hallmark movie the night before with my wife, and they went, "Oh, no." And I said, "Yes." And I will tell you something else, guys. I cried. And they went, "Oh." And you know, why would I stand up there and say that? Because it's okay. And those guys, and especially some of the younger guys, will see, oh, well, it's okay then. You know, you don't have to be the macho tough guy all the time. You know, you can, and I told him, what do you think that meant to Lori? Instead of her sitting in her room and watching the movie, and me sitting in watching a ball game in another room, that I said, hey, this movie looks interesting, let's watch it together. What do you think that did for her? I think most guys think, and I'm not saying that all women are the same, because you're not, but I think most guys think, well, I need to buy my wife this, or buy her flowers, or buy her candy, or buy her this, or buy her this. And Lori's not about any of that stuff. She doesn't even want me to buy her a card. What she wants is to be with her, to spend time with her, to not be impatient with her, to understand her. And I think, you know, I think for guys, the easy way out is just to buy something and think that's the answer. And it's really not. Why didn't you heal Becky? I mean, I understand the Bible enough that, you know, I was asked the question one day by her, why? Why me? What did I do to deserve this? I said, it's not about that. I said, I could give you a biblical answer for that, but that's not going to make you feel any better. And so I know the biblical answers, okay? But I still I see healing happen all the time. So I want to know, why not her? You know, and and Lori has asked the same question of Kenny's accident, and we say, well, maybe it's what we didn't know and didn't know what was coming down the road for both of us to be together one day and be able to have what we have today and be able to walk together with our spiritual walk and such. So I think it's a tough question, and I know the biblical answer sometimes for things, but that doesn't necessarily make us feel any better. I went to Caterpillar as a mid-career hire. I was, I already had a half a career somewhere else. That's good and that's bad. What's bad about it is sometimes people within the organization treat you differently because you're not one of them. You didn't grow up in the company. You just got here, by some other means, and somehow you didn't earn the spot where you're at. And I did advance quickly because Caterpillar valued what I learned at Blawnox with asphalt paving. And I was very fortunate that the CAT looked at it that way. And I'm not going to say they gave me anything. However, I had a peer that was also a product support supervisor of another product within our group. We sat together in the same 2-person cubicle. He really didn't give me the time of day. I mean, you could tell that it was like I just wasn't worthy to even be in that cubicle with him. And that was fine. I mean, I managed to live in that environment, and he wasn't a bad person. He just, it's just the feeling I got from him, and it didn't change who I was or who I was going to be. He got another job one day prior to me leaving Caterpillar and moved to Arizona. So no communication with him for a few years. After Becky passed, my niece had talked me into joining Facebook, which I'd never done, and I did. And sometime after that, this guy messages me through Messenger, because if you don't have somebody's phone number, you can still message them through Facebook Messenger. It's like using a cell phone. And said that he had learned that Becky had passed, and he was sorry and was offering his sympathy there and stuff. And it was kind of late one night because he's in Arizona, and I was ready to go to bed, and I was living alone, and I started sharing with him songs, Christian songs, because music is what really kind of got me through. I'm a music person, and there's a lot of good Christian songs about loss. And but then I started giving him some Bible verses that were big verses for me that kind of helped me. And we just kept going back and forth. And he said, yeah, but I like this verse. And he was telling me a verse. And we just kept going back and forth. And he eventually got to the point that he said, I didn't treat you really good at Caterpillar, but he said, I watched you every day. And he said, I saw, I knew who you were and who you claimed to be. And I saw that every day. And in an environment that is very difficult from time to time to still kind of hold fast to your values and not get caught up with the language everybody else is using and the attitude everybody else is having and stuff. And he said, it encouraged me every day to see you act like who you said you were, and you backed it up. And I really got to thinking about that and thought, and I didn't know where he was in his walk or anything, and quite honestly, I didn't even think he went to church, and he was quoting verses to me and stuff, and it would have been nice to have had some of that conversation with him at work, but I tell people all the time that people watch you and your life, how you act, how you react things that come out of your mouth, things that don't come out of your mouth, all of that is who you are. And if you claim to be a follower of Christ, but your actions don't support that, how damaging that is to people. And I think the Bible is pretty clear about that too, and what happens, when you do that sort of thing. And I'm not saying that I lead a perfect life, but what I hope at the end of the day, that people that know me say, he's a good guy, and he does the right things. He says the right things, and when he doesn't, he makes good on it. He makes it right, and I think that's all we can do. And I think at the end of the day, if that's how you're viewed, then I feel like that I've accomplished what I think God wants me to do here on this earth.